All right, let's go. This is the Friday electoral dysfunction, aka the subs bench electoral dysfunction, and we're going to find out who Jess has called up in a second. I think you're going to like this. But Ruth, before we do that, what have you been up to?
Oh, in the 3 days since we last spoke, I have been putting myself back together because bits have been falling off me. But I'm trying, like, with chewing gum and dental floss and blue tack to just, like, put myself back together.
Well, you can't see Ruth because you're listening to this, but I can tell you she's looking damn fine today.
I mean, it's not true, but I am so going to take that, baby.
And also, I should report that I also got my fill-in. Remember the Haribo that took my tooth out just before I did the leaders' debate? That tooth is fixed. But look, the big story of the last couple of days has been the claims that two Conservative candidates put bets on the timing of the election. One of them is married to the Conservative director of campaigns, and he has now taken a leave of absence from the job. I don't even know where to start with this one. There is so much to discuss on that story. Also, the tactical voting campaigns, which have been getting a lot of attention on social media, especially as the deadline for registering to vote passed earlier this week. And also, postal votes are dropping this weekend. And I was reading somewhere that 20% of people now have a postal vote. So the election gets really active now, and parties will be hoping that they can get some of those early postal votes going to them. So it's really kicking off and ramping up. And also, some of you have been asking why campaigning seems a bit quiet where you are. So we'll discuss why that might be. But before we do all of that, Jess has sent an absolute firecracker to us this week. Let's hear from Jess.
Well, hello. You might notice that my voice sounds a little bit rough today, and this is what you get when you have hundreds of conversations every day on the doorstep and the phones, although I think I sound sexy. And actually that is a link to the person who I have picked today, who I think is a powerhouse and a sexy one at that. And actually I could do with her replacing me in my home this week, because my son is sitting his maths A-level and I cannot help him. This is a woman who has found her political voice considerably better than I've got my voice at the moment in recent years, and is not too keen on Ruth's lot. So I hope you very much enjoy this week's replacement.
Wow. Number one, Jess sounds like Tom's been making a lot of cocktails back at home there, her husband Tom. But she's not, she's been working.
Well, she says she's been working. I don't know. I think she's been gargling with rough cast from a house, to be honest, by the sound of things.
It is hard work. It's hard yards on the campaign trails. But look, we have a powerhouse who's sexy and good at maths. That is not me. That is definitely not me. But you must know who that is, everyone. I'm very excited about this. It is none other than Carol Vorderman.
There you two.
Now, Carol, hello. How nice is it to be called a sexy powerhouse maths genius? Take it, yeah?
At the age of 63.
Yeah, baby.
I would agree with the maths, not the genius, not the sexy, not the this, that and the other, but I'm delighted to talk to you.
You did Countdown for what you were saying, 26 years. My granddad, when he got older, came to live with us and he loved Countdown, and we used to watch you together, and it's a very fond memory that I have from when I was a bit younger. But you are now a big player on politics Twitter. You're a presenter on LBC2. You are like the queen of reinvention, right?
Well, I don't know about that. I think the thing is, you get past the menopause and you just don't care what anybody thinks anymore. And it's like a freedom.
That's a much more positive way of looking at it. I think my auntie's basically just warned me you get like a beard. Like I like this idea that you have choices and freedom and you care less. I much prefer that to, and like your joints will ache and you won't be able to get out of a chair without making an involuntary noise and you'll get facial hair.
Carol, I'm telling you this now, you're selling the menopause to me. I can't wait for it now. If I come out the other side looking like you, I'll take it. But Carol, have you always been interested in politics?
Yes, I have. But because I grew up in North Wales and then I lived in Leeds for a very long time, worked on countdown for 26 years. We did that at Yorkshire Television. And then I've lived all over the country, and I've lived in Bristol not quite 20 years now. So I am not a London person. So my politics comes from, as everybody's does, I suppose, from how you grow up, because I grew up in abject poverty. I was a free school meals kid, comprehensive school, and so on. And, you know, through education, I got to Cambridge when I was 17 to do engineering in the 1970s, when that kind of thing just never happened. You know, I was very lucky in that way. But your politics comes from, I think, where you're from. So I'm not part of that bubble. And my frustration has grown over the last few years, particularly. Social media changes everything, really. You don't have to go through the filter of a newspaper editor anymore as a so-called celebrity. Then it gives you freedom, you know, and that's where it's come from, Beth, to be honest.
The way you are in terms of your politics now, Carol, I wonder if it's changed. Your sort of mission is to obliterate the Tories, really. Is that fair? And if it is, did you want to support the Tories? Did something change? Have you ever voted Conservative?
Yeah, I voted, you know, over the years. I voted Labour, Conservative, Lib Dems. I'm a proper swing voter. But I tell you what has changed is the Conservative Party. And particularly over the last 5 years, there's so many scandals that have come up that in the past, in the 80s or 90s, even one of them, you know, like we're going to be talking about this betting on the election date at some point, even one of those would have triggered an immediate resignation. But the Tory government that we have had is unrecognisable from what would have happened in the 80s and 90s.
Carol, when did you last vote Tory then? Was it a long time ago?
I'm trying to think, there have been so many elections, which certainly wasn't 2019. Probably 2010, I think.
David Cameron.
I think it was.
One thing could you maybe agree with the Conservatives on, which is the Prime Minister's desire to teach maths until 18. Did you like that policy? Was that something you could agree on?
No, because it should be concentrated. And I've spoken to Bridget Phillipson about this. Really, the essence is that you've got to get it right at primary school. So when we did this report, admittedly, it was 14 years ago. So the ones who got the average grade for SATs, 50% or, you know, approximately, went on to get the GCSE. Those who got the higher grade, almost all got their GCSE. And those who got the lower grade, almost all didn't get their GCSE. So secondary school just kind of fixed them in that and taught them a little bit more. So where our report was all about how we've got to fix what happens in primary school.
I mean, Bridget Phillipson, I'm sure our listeners know, but in case they don't, she is the Shadow Education Secretary for Labour and is probably, I think it's fair to say, with the way things are looking, like I think she could well become the Education Secretary in a few weeks' time, although Michael Gove, and I'll come back to him later, insists that the Conservatives can still win, Ruth, but I'm coming back to Mr Gove in a bit.
I know you're a fan's favourite. I know that you quite like hanging out with Michael Gove. You find him charming.
Not as much as you like hanging out with Michael Gove or Jess.
No, we just said that he's
That's
a dreadful
true,
flatterer, I think was what we'd said. And he is dreadful at it.
I'll say this now. I enjoy Michael Gove's company because he is an interesting person and he answers questions. And I like that in a politician. I call them Rolodex politicians, which is when you ask them a question, they pick up a key word like inflation, and then their Rolodex and their brains go and they pick out the answer and they feed you the line. Michael Gove is not a Rolodex. But Carol, you said that you talked to Bridget Phillipson. My quick question before we get on to the meat of the politics of this week is, would you work with Labour on education policy if they asked you to? And would you ever want to become a Labour MP?
No, I don't want to become an MP at all, nor do I ever want to be in the House of Lords, no offence, Ruth, because I think it all needs massive reform. Reforms that I will be campaigning for from the outside.
Well, let's go on to what's been going on this week. We said at the start, the Tories today are dealing with claims that two candidates placed bets on the timing of the general election. This is the story as it stands as we record this. Craig Williams, an aide of Rishi Sunak, he's basically his sort of junior parliamentary aide. So he's the guy that interfaces with MPs and the Prime Minister and he helps him out a bit. He is admitted to having a, quote, flutter on the election and has been contacted by the Gambling Commission. And then Laura Saunders, the candidate in Bristol North West, also faces investigation by the Commission because of claims of a bet. She's married to the party's director of campaigns, Tony Lee. So the guy that is running the campaign out of Conservative campaign headquarters. And he, as of last night, I'm told by a Conservative Party spokesman, has now taken a leave of absence. It's also been reported that he too is now being looked into as well. I mean, Ruth, what do you make of it?
What an absolute shit show. Firstly, I mean, how tawdry is it? I mean, I happen to know and like Craig Williams, but £100 when you've got insider knowledge like that, just don't do it. Just don't do it. You know, I kind of think it's quite bad form for politicians to bet on like individual seats and results and stuff anyway, because it's kind of a little bit insider trading, if you know what I mean. And certainly when you know and nobody else knows what the date is going to be, if they did, and I guess that's what's being investigated. But in terms of Tony Lee, to my knowledge, I've never met the guy. I had never heard his name before this all broke. I think, you know, wags on the internet, I mean, their first response is this Tory campaign had a national coordinator because, you know, it has been dogged from start to finish with disaster after disaster. And actually, I mean, I think there are a lot of people from the Prime Minister down in Tory HQ that should apologise to our candidates up and down the country for the manner in which this campaign has been fought, because it has been horrendous from start to finish. And if we wake up on the 5th of July and it turns out that it's been an elaborate art piece of performance art rather than an actual election campaign, I kind of wouldn't be surprised by now, because like it has just been catastrophe after catastrophe after catastrophe. And there was a week there where they almost kind of steadied the ship. Sunak went to ground for a couple of days and then came back out. But I mean, I literally have no words. Like I've been involved fighting elections now for more than 15 years and I literally have no words.
Ruth?
Yeah.
This is from a former cabinet minister that texted me about it today, and they said, it's utterly unbelievable, this is their words, that Rishi has said nothing about it, taken no action against those involved, including his parliamentary aide. That's Craig Williams. This person saying that the Prime Minister would have known what they all knew and when. I guess that's what they're looking into. What did they know and when? And then this person says it's utterly dreadful and says so much again about his judgment. Do you agree with all of that?
Completely agree with that. And also the inability of people from the Prime Minister and the closest people around him to look at how this plays out. If the Prime Minister doesn't come out and front foot this and say, you know, this is the sort of thing that you don't do, even if this is found down the road to not be illegal and there's not charges brought, we know it's immoral. You don't insider trade on stuff. It breaks a contract of trust with the country. And if he doesn't come out and front foot that, then he can't go on television without being dogged by it and having to back foot it and answer questions about it 2-3 days later. So just like take the medicine early. Just always take your medicine early.
I mean, Keir Starmer is making hay with it because he said if it were my candidates, I'd have withdrawn support from them quicker than their feet could touch the ground, etc. Should the Prime Minister have suspended or withdrawn Conservative support for the two candidates who are under investigation, Ruth? And is it one of those cases where you think he's going to have to sooner or rather than later?
I think he's going to be dragged into it. And I think that that's the problem here. You absolutely know that when you're in the fight of your life, that you want to scrap for every winnable seat, particularly if it looks like you're going down in the way that it looks like the Tories are going down in this election. But you will lose more seats by the overall viewpoint that you're not to be trusted, that like all of the other things that come along with that, rather than these two. And then you can move on for the next 2 weeks. Like the postal ballots are arriving now. They're landing this week. A quarter of Scots and a fifth of people in the rest of the UK are voting right now. And you're just not talking about what's leading the news. Like do your job. Lead from the front. Do your job in this campaign.
So the thing is, the Tory party as they stand is just sleazy. It's grubby. And it has gone on and on and on. So from outside of the Westminster bubble, I mean, openly now, people laugh at Tory politicians. Whenever they're out of your studio, Beth, whenever they're in front of an audience, They don't command any respect whatsoever. There was also, so far, another element where Sunak's close protection officer is being investigated, right? From my point of view, and from everybody outside of the bubble, we go, well, surely Craig Williams should not be an MP. The other woman, she should be gone. Because if one's gone, they should all go. And that's how we see it.
And on that, Carol, as you said, there's been an arrest related to this. That is a close protection officer working for the Prime Minister, was arrested on claims of betting on the timing of the election and has been suspended from his duties. And I guess, Ruth, the question is that, in a way, the guy that was the campaign director at CCHQ, Conservative Campaign Headquarters, he's taken a leave of absence. So they have removed him from post for the time being while there's an investigation. But these two candidates are still campaigning. And while that goes on, presumably, the Tories cannot get out from under this story, Ruth. Should they just withdraw support and just try and cauterise this?
There is that sense of it's one rule for them and one rule for everybody else. And it's always about that when it comes to people that have any level of power or influence. And your job when you're in a platformed role is to not just be whiter than white, but to demonstrate that you're whiter than the white. That's what public trust is. You have to demonstrate that you are worthy of that.
Carol, when you have your show on Sunday, what do you think your listeners are going to say? Is it going to have massive cut through, do you think?
There's a part of it which makes you laugh out loud, because I don't think I've ever seen, like you say, Ruth, a campaign run in the worst manner. But it's like they're not learning. That's the thing. If we're going to start again, we have to start clean. And then they kind of treat the public as though we're stupid, as though, oh, we're a political class. We don't need to explain to you anything.
I think there's also a lot of Conservatives that feel like Ruth do about it and are deeply uncomfortable. I should just say this has also come out as we're doing it. This is a statement on behalf of Laura Saunders. She's the candidate, you remember, that is being looked at by the Gambling Commission. This is a statement from her solicitor. As the Conservative Party has already stated, investigations are ongoing. Ms Saunders will be cooperating with the Gambling Commission and has nothing further to add. It's inappropriate to conduct any investigation of this kind via the media, and doing so risks jeopardising the work of the Gambling Commission and the integrity of its investigation. So that's a statement from Laura Saunders' solicitor. I mean, Ruth, where does that leave the story now?
Well, I think the issue with that is at no point does her solicitor say that Miss Saunders is going to be contesting this vigorously because she says she's done nothing wrong.
I mean, I guess what it also shows is that she doesn't intend to stand down and sort of disappear from the campaign, which when you are the Conservative Party and you're having this kind of storm around, sometimes you to sort of kill off the story, you kind of want people to perhaps remove themselves from the melee.
And what's kind of interesting as well is that at this point, so 2 weeks to go, the name cannot come off the ballot paper anyway, so you can still vote for this person even if the party withdraws its support. So the party can say, we are withdrawing centralised support for Ms Saunders, and she's still able to campaign locally with local party funds, and her name will always remain on the ballot paper because the party can't do that.
I did ask Mr Gove on the bus this morning, because I was on the campaign bus, and he got the shit sandwich today, really, because this story was breaking and Michael Gove is on the bus with the journalists and he's done the media round and the story's developing and he has to be asked about it. When I put it to him about what had been happening, he said he was almost lost for words. And also, Ruth, your name came up.
All right.
When we were talking to Michael Gove, because I told him what you had said about Nigel Farage becoming a Tory when you said that would happen over your dead corpse.
Cold dead corpse.
Oh, your cold, I did say cold. Your cold dead corpse. And I put this to Mr Gove and this was his response.
I want to keep Ruth alive. I want to make sure that a warm and powerful and energetic Ruth is at the heart of the Conservative Party's future. And on Nigel Farage, Nigel's not a Conservative. I've got respect for some of the things that he's done in the past, but he's clear he wants to destroy the Conservative Party.
You know, as a baseline goes, I'm very pleased that Michael Gove doesn't want to see me dead.
We're going to have to get him on the pod, Ruth, after he's stood down.
Oh, I'd love to have Michael Gove on the pod.
But look, let's pause here We're going to be back in a minute to talk about tactical voting campaigns. Carol, it's a really good week to have you on. After the voter registration passed on Tuesday night, there were social media campaigns to get people to sign up and then use their vote tactically. And this was a movement you were really involved in. Can you tell me about it and how it went?
Well, yeah, it's gone brilliantly. So there are a number of different organisations who've been involved with trying to get people to register. I got involved about a year ago at the local election time last year with a group of volunteers, and they call themselves the Movement Forward, and they're very much pro-proportional representation. And as a sideline, they set up a tactical voting website. So we tried 2 lots out on the local elections, and now obviously going large on the general election. It's going great guns.
But Carol, and then I'll bring you in, Ruth, because I'm interested to hear your view about it as well. Is the counterpoint to this that encouraging people to vote tactically also, on the one hand, it encourages political engagement because people are signing up to vote, yeah, and they're interested in it. But then they're not necessarily engaging with the policies and the ideas. What do you think of that, Carol? Is that a fair argument?
Well, no, the argument really is that we're introducing the idea that you should never have to tactically vote, that proportional representation in some form is where we should be going, because it's the, first past the post. It's nonsense. Every vote should matter. In the system that we have for Westminster, it doesn't. And so that fundamentally is our drive. It's awful that you have to tactically vote. We don't ever want that again. And we're growing the number of people who are with us to put pressure on the next government to have some form of PR.
Although I know that the Liberal Democrats didn't they have a referendum on it in government, or a vote on it?
They did. So there was a referendum in the coalition years between 2010 and 2015, and it was part of the coalition agreement, as in the Lib Dems would only join government if they were allowed to have a referendum on changing the voting system. It wasn't a massive success, I have to say, but it allowed Nick Clegg to say that he tried and that the country had turned it down.
But, we're in a very different time to them. Even 10 years has changed how people feel. And social media has changed a lot of that as well, so that, people can get their news, as you know, the under 40s, most of them get their news not via mainstream media. A year ago, I was saying we could get them down to like 80 seats or less, and was laughed at, out of court. And look where we are now.
Ruth, do you just think that it should just be a straight fight and tactical voting, organised tactical voting is not where you're at?
I mean, I know I always bang on about this, but once again, Scotland is ahead of the rest of the country. When I was leading the Scottish Conservatives, we actually had 4 separate voting systems in Scotland. So we had first past the post at general elections. For Holyrood elections, we had the additional member system, which is a modified version of D'Hondt. We had full STV at all our council elections, single transferable vote, and all of Scotland's council seats go up for election at the same time. So it's quite a good indicator of how that works. And then when we were still in Europe, we had pure D'Hondt for the European elections, because Scotland was, as a nation, was treated as one individual voting kind of state or region. So you had the whole country voting that way. And you still had tactical voting irrespective of which system that you used. Personally, I would really like to live in, a world where everybody votes for what they want rather than voting against what they don't want. But I don't get to tell people what decides their vote. People choose to vote on what's important to them. And for some people, that will be changing the government. For some people, it will be having a great local representative. For some people, it will be the party that they've always supported, man and boy. We don't get to make that choice for the voters of this country. However, the tactical voting guides that exist, whether it's Carol's, whether it's the ones in the newspapers, wherever, the ones you can find online, are telling people what the likely outcome of their vote might be. And I guess that's where you get into a decision about, what are the merits and demerits of that.
That's another reason why people were put off politics, because it's like 4 different systems.
Hand on heart, I've said this a number of times and believe it, that we genuinely have some of the most sophisticated electorate in Scotland because people have had to learn the voting systems, and they do. Genuinely, and even people that don't particularly tune into politics, they're not watching Newsnight and Question Time every night, genuinely know what they need to do where they are to get X outcome. And whether that's getting the Tories out, or whether that's getting the SNP out, or whether that's getting Labour in, or whatever it is, they know how to use their vote in Scotland.
But the feeling about wanting to obliterate the Conservative Party, that for almost half of people, for 45% are saying that they are prepared to vote tactically to do so. That is a much greater emotional thing than it is, to say, oh, well, I'm going to vote with my heart. And it's more about coordinating it, particularly with all the boundary changes. So it's a coordinated tactical vote.
I think where I would take issue with Carol is on the use of words like obliterate. So even when Corbyn was leading the Labour Party, for example, and particularly his geopolitics and his views around security, around sort of international relations, where I found them abhorrent. I found the anti-Semitism that was allowed to flourish within his party, I found it offensive. I would never have said, in the 2019 election, for example, I want the Labour Party to be obliterated, because I recognise that actually the clash of ideas is helpful. Like, you keep people out of office, get them out of office, absolutely. But actually, I think debate flourishes when you have a proper ability to have conversations between left and right, to have different worldviews in the room. And I think one of the issues for me in politics in the time that I've been involved in 15 years, and one of the things that social media has done, is that there is that sense of absolutism now, is that you don't just want your opponent to be beaten, you want your enemy to be crushed. And I think part of the problem that we have is that through social media, we're talking less about policies and ideas and that creative clash, and we're talking about what's somebody's background, where did they come from, how did they vote on, I don't know, Brexit or whatever. So let's not listen to them first. And I think that does our politics a disservice, because actually, done well, disagreement can be incredibly healthy and renewing for a country.
I don't disagree with any of that, Ruth, but that's not the situation that we live in. The last 5 years, we've had 3 appalling prime ministers, and people are suffering. And so, they have every right to get angry.
Let's move on, ladies, because I want to come to campaign strategies, because Ruth, you might be able to help Russell, Karen and others who have been in touch this week, who basically say 2 weeks to go and there seems to be no campaigning where we are. They say they've had no leaflets or no door knocks. I mean, they're basically being ghosted in an election campaign. What can you read into that?
Well, I think it depends where you live. I think it depends, in terms of the information that parties hold. There are rules about how much you're allowed to spend, not just on a national campaign, but how much you're allowed to spend in every single constituency. So parties do several things. So they have target seats where they help do the stuff that's free. So they'll ship in local activists from other seats into target seats. If the seat next door, for example, isn't a target seat, you see more activity of the free kind. You also have mosaics, and all parties do this. You break down where voters are, where they live, what their age is, what their affluence level is, what their educational level is, how many cars there are in the driveway, whether they own their house outright, whether it's rented, all of that sort of stuff. So you mosaic people down and you make assumptions about their voting intention from that. You also have previous information from previous elections. And in something like this week, so when the postal votes are landing, a well-run campaign, this week and on the run-up to the vote landing on the mat, you should be going back to the people that you know or think you know will vote for your party to make sure that they're still voting for your party and that nobody's going to pinch them off you. You should be knocking on those doors, in this particular part of the campaign.
Look, we've got this far without me talking about something that I would like to share with you, Carol, which is that I appeared on Countdown in Dictionary Corner with Susie. She was so nice to me. She was the kindest soul.
Yeah, she's lovely, Susie.
Also, the other thing I can reveal, which Carol will know all too well, is you do a whole week of recording in one day. So you just get to do it for hours. And I was really trying hard to do it, very unsuccessfully. But I was sitting there, I had my pen out. I was trying to do my honestly, best day of work I've ever done. Carol, I can see why you did it for 26 years. It's just bloody great.
I loved it. But Richard Whiteley, obviously, you remember Richard Whiteley, and he was a political journalist, and he was was down in Brighton when the Brighton bomb went off. He was in the bar, obviously, at 3:00 in the morning. That was Richard Whiteley. He was the biggest party animal, and I loved him, absolutely loved him. But we laughed like drains every day, like proper belly laughing.
It's also very impressive how you did the sums, Carol. I was just like, she's so clever.
I've heard that Richard Whiteley is a party animal because some friends of mine, and like I said, I'm a total nerd at university and did university debating mostly because all of the big competitions were sponsored by alcohol companies. So friends of mine that went to Trinity College in Dublin invited him over to do like their Freshers' Week debate. You always have kind of celebs to do it. And, you know, you then take the guest, you like obviously pay for the travel, you take the guest for dinner afterwards and all the rest of it. And then he made them take him drinking and they drank Temple Bar pretty much dry. And he was still going when everybody else was sneaking off home at 3 a.m. Like the man could bury it, apparently. He was all over it.
We used to specialise in the long lunch, like 3 sittings. And we held, I mean, he died in 2005, but we held records in many London restaurants. When we were down in London, we particularly did it for the longest lunches, you know, like 9 hours, 12 hours, whatever it might be.
I like that people that appear nice on telly are actually nice in real life. Like when you find stories of people that you always think, oh, do you know, I'd really like to know them. And then you hear something where like, oh, they're actually an utter bitch in real life. And you're just like, oh, no, make that not true. You could tell that Richard Whiteley was a nice guy.
Yeah. I remember being in the Yorkshire telly reception in the early days, early 1980s. We started in 1982. And one of the most charismatic people in person I'd ever met was in reception. It was Arthur Scargill. Yeah. And it was like he had a kind of aura about him. And people kind of fall at his feet, including me almost. You know, it was like, he's just so charming.
I call it they move the air in the room. So they walk into a room and things change, like the atmosphere slightly changes. And either people have got a huge level of charisma. And the first time I kind of felt it with a politician that I instinctively knew intellectually I didn't like, and then I met them in real life and they were just so smooth, was Peter Mandelson. Like, genuinely charming man.
Really?
Well, look, after the election, I'm available for all dinner parties. Or just up to the election, I'm not, but after the election, available for all dinner parties. Anyway, you know, it's still 2 days to polling day.
2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
So,
not
did
2
I
days.
say 2 days? That's in my dreams.
Yeah,
2 more days. 2 weeks. Well, look, we've got to go. I just want to say, Carol, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for putting up with me.
Oh, no, it has been an absolute joy and a delight.
Well, look, thanks, ladies. Let's say goodbye. Thanks,
Bye.
Carol. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.